Remember when Brad Pitt's Achilles leapt and the theater went silent? Behind those bronze walls and Eric Bana's Hector hid hurricanes, a fired composer and a star who tore his own Achilles tendon. Today we're counting down 15 weird facts you never knew about Troy. Number 15. That towering wooden horse rolling through the gates of Troy while Trojans cheer in the torchlight is one of the most iconic images in the whole film. Here's the thing. It was never wood. The horse was a steel and fiberglass structure built at Shepperton Studios in Surrey, shipped to Malta in sections, and reassembled inside the Fort Ricasoli set. It stood 40 feet tall and weighed 12 tons. Production designer Nigel Phelps's team built it that way because a real timber structure of that scale would have been a fire hazard, impossible to transport and too fragile for actors to actually climb inside. The steel skeleton solved every constraint at once. It could be broken down, crossed an ocean, and still photographed as hand-hewn Bronze Age timber from every angle the cameras needed. Phelps needed something that looked ancient and felt massive without being either. After production wrapped, Warner Bros. Donated the prop to the Turkish Ministry of Culture. It now stands permanently on the Çanakkale waterfront near the supposed archaeological site of the real Troy. Look for the seams the next time you watch this film. That glinting texture catching the firelight is industrial fiberglass pretending to be ancient oak. And the man hiding inside that horse was a stand-up comedian nobody expected to carry one of the most emotional performances in the entire film. Number 14. Hector's quiet goodbye to Andromache and his infant son before walking out to face Achilles is the most emotionally grounded scene in the entire film. It belongs to an actor who made his name doing impressions on Australian late-night television. Before Chopper, before The Hulk, before Troy, Eric Bana's career was built on sketch comedy. When he came to Troy, he was offered his choice of multiple roles, and he deliberately selected Hector. He told Black Film in May 2004 that he picked the most stoic, doomed character simply because he found Hector to be such a great bloke. That choice sounds deceptively simple. Think about what it actually meant. Bana was walking away from the showy role of Achilles to play a man the audience watches lose everything, knowing from the very first scene that he will not survive. His decision to underplay Hector against Brad Pitt's rock star Achilles is what gives the film its emotional spine. Without that contrast, the duel reads as spectacle rather than tragedy. To make it credible, Bana and Pitt trained roughly 7 months for the climactic fight and shot the entire duel without stunt doubles, working with stunt coordinator Simon Crane to make every spear thrust and shield clash land in real time. Watch Hector's eyes in the final fight. Bana is playing a man who already knows he will lose. The woman opposite him went through a completely different kind of ordeal just to get the part. Number 13. Diane Kruger's Helen, framed in candlelight, telling Paris she doesn't want to be remembered as the woman who started a war. It is one of the most quietly devastating lines in the film. Getting to that moment cost Kruger more than she expected. The studio originally pushed for Nicole Kidman, Cameron Diaz, Uma Thurman, or Julia Roberts. Director Wolfgang Petersen wanted an unknown, the way he had discovered Nastasia Kinski in German television 2 decades earlier. Petersen sifted through roughly 3,000 audition tapes before flying Kruger in for a studio screen test. She was a former model from Hildesheim, Germany, with only small French film credits to her name. Here is what the studio screen test actually felt like. Kruger later told Variety she felt like meat, being looked up and down, and asked why she thought she deserved the role. The studio's stated benchmark, relayed to her by the production, was that they were searching for the face that could launch 1,000 ships. Casting a complete unknown opposite Pitt was a structural gamble. It paid off because Kruger's unfamiliarity as a screen presence let audiences actually believe that Paris would destroy a civilization for her. A recognizable star would have collapsed that illusion before the first reel ended. Every silent close-up of Kruger came at the end of a process that rejected thousands of other faces. The man playing Achilles next to her had spent 6 months doing something considerably more demanding than an audition. Number 12. Achilles emerging from his tent oiled and shirtless before the duel with Boagrius. That entrance was not a costume choice. It was the result of 6 months of the most expensive personal training in the film's production budget. To build from a wiry 155 pounds toward a warrior physique, Pitt hired trainer Gregory Trojan Horse and a full support team including a nutritionist, masseuse, martial artist, and yoga instructor at approximately $5,000 per week. Trojan Horse ran 3 hours of training per day, 6 days a week for 6 months. The program added roughly 30 pounds of muscle at 6% body fat, as Jujan Roche later detailed in his own account of the regimen. Pitt also quit smoking for the role. He later told Vanity Fair he had been a professional smoker who still missed it and held to a strict diet of chicken, brown rice, and broccoli through the entire preparation period, with the occasional McFlurry as the only documented cheat. Director Peterson told journalists he wanted a standard of physical beauty modeled on Peter O'Toole and Omar Sharif in Lawrence of Arabia. Pitt was approaching 40 and treated the transformation as a personal experiment as much as a professional requirement. Every flexed muscle in the film is the receipt for a year of Pitt's life and several $100,000 in personal training fees. And all of that preparation nearly became irrelevant when the filming location turned into something close to a war zone. Number 11. That sweeping aerial shot of Greek warships crossing toward the Trojan shore was going to be filmed somewhere else entirely. The original plan placed beach landings and exterior walls in Morocco. Then two things happened at once. The May 16, 2003 Casablanca bombings, 5 coordinated suicide attacks that killed 45 people and represented the deadliest terrorist event in Morocco's modern history, combined with the beginning of the Iraq War to make the North African location untenable. Warner Bros. Was forced to relocate the entire Mediterranean side of production. Producer Diana Rathbun pivoted the beach sequences to Cabo San Lucas in Mexico, while the city of Troy was rebuilt inside Fort Ricasoli in Malta, a 1670 bastioned fortress that had previously housed Ridley Scott's Gladiator Coliseum set just 4 years earlier. Peterson admitted to Vanity Fair that he had personally regretted turning down Gladiator and had no hesitation when Troy came around. He refused to abandon the project despite 2 simultaneous logistical crises happening at the same time on 2 different continents. At Cannes in 2004, both Safran Burrows and Pitt acknowledged the obvious parallel between a Western army invading a Middle Eastern city and the then ongoing conflict in Iraq. The Morocco plan would have made that comparison unavoidable every day on set. That sun-baked beach landing is Mexico standing in for Turkey standing in for Greek myth, because bombs went off in Casablanca, and the Maltese fortress they built Troy inside already had a famous Hollywood tenant. Number 10. Hector and Paris riding through Troy's Grand Square while citizens line the streets. Those streets were built on a 10-acre patch inside Fort Ricasoli, a 1670 bastion fortress on the Grand Harbor at Valletta, Malta, constructed by the Knights of St. John and still a functioning military heritage site. The same fort had previously housed the Gladiator Coliseum set. It later accommodated Game of Thrones, Ridley Scott's Napoleon, and The Last Voyage of the Demeter. The interior palace scenes for Troy were shot separately on stages at Shepperton Studios in Surrey. Peterson worked with the Malta Film Commission to dress an existing limestone fortification rather than build an ancient city from scratch, saving months of construction while gaining authentic scale that no studio backlot could replicate. The harbor backdrop, the weathered walls, the sheer weight of the stone all photographed as genuinely ancient from almost every camera position, building inside a real fort gave the production geometry and texture that no production designer could manufacture. Those worn surfaces, those proportions, that sky above a natural harbor, all of it was already there. Peterson just had to dress it correctly. The ancient streets of Troy are Maltese limestone that has stood since the Knights Hospitaller built it 4 centuries ago. But not everyone marching through those streets was being treated equally, and the people who weren't eventually stopped marching altogether. Number 9. Wide shots of thousands of Greek soldiers moving in formation across the beach toward the walls of Troy. The scale of those sequences required bodies from multiple countries. The logistics of managing them nearly shut down the film. Roughly 300 Bulgarian athletes and weightlifters were flown from a sports academy in Sofia to Cabo San Lucas. They discovered on arrival that they were being paid $12 a day for working in 100-degree heat, while Mexican local extras earned $40 for the same work in the same sun. The horses on set had shade structures. The Bulgarian extras did not. One of them later described the situation to filmmaker Krasimir Terziev, who documented the experience. "We covered ourselves with the shields and fell asleep. The horses were in the shade, but we weren't." Production shut down for 3 days. After the strike, the per-day rate for the Bulgarians was raised by $10. Peterson confirmed to Time magazine that a few flew home in a rage. Eric Bana told Time the men had been recruited specifically for close-up brutality. Those guys were absolutely beating the crap out of each other. The bloodied soldiers in those frontline close-ups are the men who shut production down over fair pay. And then, just when that crisis was resolved, the weather did what the extras could not and brought everything to a halt again. Number 8. The towering gates of Troy looming above Achilles before his final duel with Hector. Those gates were built, destroyed, and built again before a single frame of that scene was ever shot. Category 2. Hurricane Marty made landfall on September 22, 2003, approximately 10 miles northeast of Cabo San Lucas, with peak winds of 100 miles per hour. The gates of Troy, a reportedly million-dollar build, were almost completely demolished. Peterson told Vanity Fair exactly what it looked like. The hurricane destroyed the entire thing, these huge tents where all the costumes and props were. It all just disappeared, basically flew into the air. Pitt reportedly woke at 4 in the morning to find his personal residence in Cabo torn apart and then went back to sleep. A structure housing approximately 1,000 extras was also leveled. A second hurricane struck during the final production week, but did less damage because most footage was already in the can. The marine biologists kept on set to protect the local endangered sea turtle population worked through both storms. The gates Hector dies in front of are the second pair Warner Bros. Paid to build, and the men training to fight in front of them had their own private financial arrangement for every time one of them actually made contact. Alright, we're at the halfway mark and things are about to get even wilder. Before we hit the top 7, I want to hear from you. What's your favorite Troy moment? Drop it in the comments. And if you're enjoying this, smash that like button and subscribe. It really does help the channel grow. Number 7. The brutal extended fight between Achilles and Hector outside the gates. No quick cuts. Just two actors who had spent most of a year learning to actually fight each other. Pitt and Bana shot the entire 6-day duel sequence without stunt doubles, working with stunt coordinator Simon Crane across 7 to 8 months of preparation. The training was specific to the scene. Bana's grounded defensive style against Pitt's leaping, balletic attacks, choreographed by Crane and Peterson to externalize character psychology through the physical language of the fight. They also made a gentleman's agreement. Every accidental light hit would cost the guilty party $50, payable to the other man. Every hard hit cost $100. By the final day of filming, Pitt owed Bana $750. Bana owed Pitt nothing. Paste magazine later called the sequence a testament to the skill that the Troy production brought to the film's action. Crane described it as revelation of character through the fight in post-production interviews. When Hector tags Achilles' armor somewhere in the middle of that fight, that contact was not in the choreography. Bana actually connected and technically had $50 coming his way for making contact. The score playing behind that duel, however, was not what anyone had originally planned, agreed upon, or intended for it to be. Number 6. The pounding percussion driving Achilles up the beach and the haunting female vocals floating over the funeral pyres. The score audiences heard in theaters was written in 13 days by a composer who was not the original choice. Gabriel Yared, the Oscar-winning composer behind The English Patient, spent more than a year writing the Troy score and recorded it in February 2004. After a single test screening in Sacramento, the audience response cards called the music overpowering, too big, old-fashioned. Warner Bros. Dismissed Yared overnight. He later posted an open letter online and briefly shared clips of his rejected work. Film music critic Christian Clemenson rated Yared's unreleased score 5 stars, and The Replacement 3. James Horner came in as the emergency replacement. Scoring mixer Simon Rhodes told Mix Online that Horner had 13 days to write 75 minutes of score. Recording completed on April 21, 2004. The final dub was finished the following day. Horner drew on vocalist Tanja Tsarovska and reached into his own earlier scores to hit the deadline, pulling recognizable motifs to fill time he simply did not have. When the director's cut arrived in 2007, much of Horner's work was reshuffled, and most strikingly, Danny Elfman's main theme from Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes was tracked under the Hector-Achilles duel, replacing Horner's original cue. Listen for the familiar passages in the score. That is Horner cannibalizing his catalog to make an impossible deadline. Number 5. Patroclus dying in Hector's arms after wearing Achilles' armor is the moment that cracks the whole film open. Without that death, Achilles never returns to battle, and the story has no ending. The actor who played Patroclus had been in Hollywood for approximately 4 weeks. Garrett Hedlund arrived in Los Angeles from Roseau, Minnesota, carrying, in his own words, $600, a Tupperware container of cleaning utensils, and about 90 packages of ramen noodles. Within 1 month, he auditioned for and booked Troy as his very first professional acting role. Hebland was 18 during filming. He later confirmed to Interview magazine that Troy was my first thing ever. His approach walking into the audition was deliberate and direct. If I want to get into a film with A-list actors, then I'd better walk into the room pretending to be one. He told W magazine that his senior prom was happening back home in Minnesota while he was on a film set in Malta. Casting director Laura Kennedy found him through standard general auditions within weeks of his arrival. Peterson made the decision on pure instinct, based on what he saw in one room. Patroclus is the film's emotional pivot. Casting a complete unknown opposite Brad Pitt in the scene that turns everything was one of the biggest gambles Peterson made without a safety net, several names everyone assumed were attached to the film almost never appeared in it at all. Number 4. Rose Byrne's Briseis holding a knife to Achilles' throat in his tent, then choosing not to use it. Every version of that scene almost starred someone else, in a film directed by someone else, with someone else standing behind the camera. Briseis was first offered to Aishwarya Rai Bachchan, who turned it down because the 6 to 9 month exclusive contract conflicted with her Bollywood commitments, and she was reportedly uncomfortable with the film's love scenes. Keira Knightley also auditioned before the role went to Rose Byrne. Director Terry Gilliam had previously passed on the entire project because, in his own words, he did not understand how you can make a film based on the Iliad without the participation of the Greek gods. Then there is the director's chair itself. Peterson briefly stepped away from Troy to develop a Batman vs. Superman project. Warner Bros. Offered the Troy directing job to Christopher Nolan, who was available at the time. When Peterson's Batman project collapsed and he returned to Troy, Nolan was redirected toward Batman Begins as an alternative assignment. Aishwarya Rai confirmed the offer to Indian Express directly, explaining that a 6 to 9 month exclusive lockout was simply incompatible with her existing commitments. A different series of decisions gives you a Nolan-directed Troy starring Aishwarya Rai opposite Brad Pitt. Instead, those dominoes produced Batman Begins, launched Nolan's entire DC run, and gave Rose Byrne her international breakthrough. And one veteran actor flew himself across the Atlantic for a chance at the villain. Number 3. Brian Cox's Agamemnon scheming from behind the battle, gleefully watching cities burn, finally taking a blade during the sack of Troy. Cox is enormous in the role. Turns out that performance started with a personal flight and a phone call he made without being asked. Cox told Vanity Fair that Agamemnon was the only role he ever actively pursued in his entire career. I knew the part was available and I knew I was dead right for the role. I volunteered to fly myself to London to meet Wolfgang Petersen. He got the meeting. He got the part. David Benioff's screenplay kills Agamemnon on screen during the sack of Troy, a major departure from both Homer's Iliad and the Greek tragedy tradition, where Agamemnon survives the war and is murdered at home by his wife. Cox built his character specifically as a villain designed to earn an on-screen death, a man the audience would want to see fall. Then there was the experience of actually being on set with Pitt. Cox told Vanity Fair, "Brad walked on set and my jaw dropped because he was so stunningly beautiful. I'm straight, but I thought, my God, this guy is stunning. What chance does one have on screen against this beautiful, beautiful man?" Cox is not performing bigger than the room. He is performing against a man he could not stop looking at. The version of Troy Cox appeared in, though, was not the version Peterson actually wanted to release. Number 2. The brisk, compressed sack of Troy at the end of the theatrical cut feels like it is over before it fully registers. For Wolfgang Petersen, the theatrical version of the entire film had that same problem throughout. Peterson assembled a 196-minute director's cut in 2007 that he called "more the film I wanted it to be." The director's cut restores approximately 30 minutes, including extended love scenes, a full and substantially darker sack of Troy, a humorous Odysseus introduction for Sean Bean, Andromache, and Helen's escape through a hidden tunnel, and bookend sequences involving a soldier's dog finding its dead master and survivors fleeing to Mount Ida. Per Peterson's interview with Variety, Warner Bros. Spent more than $1 million reassembling the cut, which contains at least 1,000 new editorial decisions. Peterson told the magazine that time constraints and ratings pressures had shaped the theatrical version and that his preferred cut gives it more time to breathe. Most strikingly, Danny Elfman's main theme from Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes was tracked under the climactic Hector-Achilles duel in the director's cut, replacing portions of Horner's original score entirely. The theatrical Troy and the director's cut are effectively two different films. The version most audiences saw in 2004 was the version the studio approved. The director's preferred film has never been widely seen, and the single biggest production disaster of the entire shoot happened on the most ironic possible part of the human body. Number 1. The opening duel. Achilles vaulting off the ground, sword raised, driving the blade through Boreas in one slow-motion arc that announces everything the character is. That leap is the exact moment Brad Pitt, playing the only figure in Western literature defined by a vulnerable heel, tore his own Achilles tendon. Production shut down for several weeks. Peterson described it to the Sydney Morning Herald in May 2004 with precise clarity. Look at his face when he lands. There's a second you can see something's wrong. Great for the scene, terrible for the movie. Brad was hobbling around for months, and we had to come back later to finish the last scene, which ironically was another big one-on-one combat scene, the duel between Brad and Eric. Pitt acknowledged it himself with characteristic understatement. In a bout of stupid irony, I tweaked my Achilles tendon, which is bizarre. The forced hiatus for the Hector-Achilles duel hit at exactly the worst possible moment. The injury combined with Hurricane Marty destroying the gate set and the last-minute score crisis to create 3 simultaneous production catastrophes in the film's final act. Both Pitt and Bana had to maintain peak physical condition during a 3-month gap before the climactic fight could be filmed. The duel they had spent 7 months training to shoot was pushed to the very last days of production because of a single landing in the very first scene. That opening leap is not just the introduction of Achilles, it is the precise moment that nearly brought down the entire $200 million production built around him and his legend. Troy overcame chaos that kills productions, a terrorist attack, 2 hurricanes, a fired composer, a torn tendon, and a director who never got the film he wanted to make. Behind the bronze armor and the beach battles, every choice was improvised under pressure. The horse was fiberglass, the city was a medieval fortress, the score was written in 13 days, and the lead actor tore the tendon named after his own character. What looks timeless on screen was a fight every single day to keep the cameras rolling. If this video surprised you, drop your favorite fact in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves this movie as much as you do. And as always, is there no one else? We'll see you next time.